Viju, thank you so much for joining us today. It is such a pleasure to host you. So excited to learn from your story. Let us jump right into the questions. And like I said, Viju, I love the mission that you stand for, which is, making Web3 more accessible. I feel like that is such a need. It is really not easy for an ordinary person to understand quicker. And for you guys, if you don't know, Viju has been the initial contributor at Interface. And what Interface does is making, like if you see all your activities on Etherscan, it's just like a bunch of sentences and a bunch of wallet addresses, giving that a beautiful interface. Think of like a marriage of Twitter and Instagram, but something that's much more readable and digestible in a really friendly manner. So I think that's amazing. But Viju, the biggest question I want to ask you is, why do you think there's such a big gap in the Web3 ecosystem? Like, why do most of the platforms' UI and UX suck? Like, Web2 people's biggest blocker can be like, they might not understand the value of these platforms. Messaging is not clear. People don't understand what social tokens are. And I think the biggest thing for someone in the Web2 space is that, they end up connecting a wallet, then entering Web3, but people don't even know what MetaMask is. They don't know how to get started. So why do you think like Web3's user interface sucks so much at this point?
Okay, I think there's two parts to this question. So one is basically, it's more like how the industry, any sort of industry evolves, I would say. So if we look at the evolution of crypto and the industry itself, we can see like three clear iterations. So initial one for the graphic views, etc., is basically Bitcoin and early Ethereum era, when you have a block explorers, which basically kind of showcase the basic balances and transactions, and that's basically the only need they needed to kind of showcase, like all the minted new blocks and so on. So there was not much. And then we also can look at that usually early industries, sectors, etc., are built by like technicians, etc. So it's usually serves the very basic needs. And the second, I think, iteration of the industry has been the DeFi era of 2018 to 2020, I would say. So when the new financial primitives have been spun upon in Ethereum, and that has spawned a lot of different interfaces and analytical platforms, portfolios, managers like Nansen, Dune, Zapper, Zerion, Dbank, and so on, which basically kind of solve the problem of showcasing what are your true assets, what are the various financial primitives are, and so on. So there was not much to showcase apart from like raw data aggregations and charts, etc. So there was no really need. And now we're like entering third phase, when there's a lot more additional sectors have been put on chain, and thus these sectors like publishing, mirror, governance has grown tremendously. NFTs themselves represent all sort of as being like a very basic primitive, which is just like basically a unique ownership asset. So those kind of things require additional means to communicate and showcase and be surfaced. And that's where we see the interface kind of lies, like a third generation of user-facing applications. But there's a lot of different pieces that basically needed to kind of conceptualize. And to give you an example, so if DeFi era, we called it like Legos, financial Legos, and all those sort of different primitives were composed together, and when people were like depositing liquidity into Uniswap and then taking the LP tokens and putting it somewhere else, so there was like a lot of different things that were kind of composed on top of each other, and especially like I would say probably YFI token, like probably one of the most representative of those ideas. So, but now we have like a lot more different pieces of human activities that now puts on chain. So your identity, like things like ENS, your social graphs, your activities, they can represent all sorts of different stuff, like you voting on the proposals, etc. So there's just many more layers to be kind of built upon. And we're just basically trying to kind of look at what is the essence of all of these things and surface these things. So it's pretty simple approach. We look at the underlying entity or activity and for what it is and what is the most important about this piece of data, and we take it out and make it like nice. If it's a picture, we show you the picture, so it's like an avatar on NS. If it's something else, we show you whatever it's, I mean, basically you are interacting, what you are generating, etc. For the latter, yeah, I think another part of this regarding, if we could say that, because I think there are lots of actually really nice platforms spawning up and making things so much more usable, etc. But I think it's just like a general evolution of the industry, and based on industry needs and people who are participating in industry, those are the kind of you have when you hit like to get closer to adoption, like mass adoption, you get closer to consumer apps. When you start, people send transaction on Bitcoin using terminal, and they run their own nodes on the computers. So and they have like their own wallet. So that's basically, I think, where we are.
Amazing. What do you think is the solution? Like, do companies need to hire much more like product designers once they figured out the tech, once they figured out the processes? Is it now about building for the people? Because I remember like you published an amazing tweet that it's actually about the people first. You solve people's problem, whether it is about saving time, resources, and etc. And things like apps, protocols, and ecosystems are just a means to achieve it. So you feel like these complicated interfaces are actually defeating the purpose of going on to help people?
Yeah, I hope to believe that internal ideas like of Bitcoin, white paper, and the internet cache, and then the Ethereum ethos and the culture of having permissionless self-ownership of the like custody of assets, and potentially even censorship resistant, but time will tell if this will stick around. But those kind of things are empowering each individuals to be self-governing actors within the human civilization and how we operate. So yeah, then that'll be nice if we can keep up with basically with this set of goals, and I think very intuitive interfaces are going to play a much bigger role if we were to kind of let everyone use. So, and I think we're fairly lucky that we have already a lot of great Web2 platforms that kind of worked out a lot of different user experiences, intuitive way things. Basically, there's basically a lot of data knowledge that can be bootstrapped and then reutilized in the, let's say, the third generation of the web itself, so that when we are proceeding to moving from apps back to protocols. And so I think here it's going to play a big role regarding how to achieve this. I think it's going to come naturally, so at the end markets are going to decide ultimately, I think, which interfaces, I think basically we'll see a lot of really nice projects coming up, and I think there are a lot of right now in the process of getting shipped, whether it's a new, much more readable Etherscan and so on. So I think it's just a matter of time, and there are great teams that are solving this, and so that by the time we have a next let's say what's it called, catalyst for the growth, so that we will be much more prepared to convert newcomers, because I think a lot of platforms that have succeeded this cycle were there prior to the cycle. So I think, but they kind of reap the benefits of the, let's say, the NFT, PFP high, let's call it this cycle. So if the previous one was ICOs, now it will be NFTs. I mean, 95%, I don't know, 90.7% of this is noise, but through this, there is basically a lot of different people get into the in the industry, but most importantly, very like 5 or like 10% of these people who come into the industry, they stick around during the bear, and they're like usually the builders or they understood the ideas. So it's a similar, I think, to any kind of human things we do. So sometimes you have an artist that manages like a musician, which drops a new album, and one of the like some of the album songs might be like hitting mainstream, and then this person gets exposure. But then like 95%, 90% of the people who listen to the song, they don't go further than researching the discography of this artist, but few will actually go and dive deep what this person has been doing. So this is like just a way to kind of get on the radar, and then maybe like 10, 50, I'm not sure, but a lot of people will basically minority, but I think kind of relative to this artist, lots of people could then dive deep and see what this person has been up to, the musician. And I think the same comes for where we are within the crypto as well. But
Right. Thank you so much for very interestingly you gave the musician analogy, which I agree to. Like people who are super interested do dive deep and do find the answers and stuff. And we recently got we're working with Aave. We got a grant with them, and for them we are building on an alternative UI, basically to make it easier for like non-DeFi user. So I would even like love to get your feedback on what we're building and stuff, because I feel like you have deep experience in the UI and UX, but we're not here to talk about that right now. I wanted to ask about interface. There is a wallet eligibility requirement, example, having an ENS avatar, participating in protocol, or having 75% transactions, etc. So I'd love to know your reason on gating the app.
Also, just to add on the UI UX, so everything that is designed within the interface is done by Anushka.eth. So she's like the responsible behind everything, all the beautiful stuff we see. And so shout out to her. And regarding to your question, how we see is that we're solving two problems here. So we are in a private beta because of we're still preparing the main infrastructure and like the next iteration of the app, so we're not public yet. So we are scaling linearly here, and this we control what people like kind of get onboarded, etc. So here, why we do so is because each new user for us is like a passive signal, what they have been interacting with, what contracts, what things, because we need to kind of go out, see what kind of things this person has worked with, maybe used, and so on, so that we can label it accordingly, decode it, and so on. And this only scales initially fairly linearly, and thus we don't want to give up the control of the onboarding process. So this is for us is just like a way to control how we scale, so the growth-wise, so that we can, along with all the newcomers, make the user experience nice and smooth. And the other part is that we will gradually lower and lower the criteria and keep adding new eligibility areas. So we'll do a lens integration, and then we will let anyone who has a lens profile get access to the application later this month, and so on. So here we'll be gradually adding new communities, new criteria, lowering and onboarding more and more people, because we are not like in a traditional way a social platform. Let's say how, like if we compare to DaoLens or Farcaster or Twitter, where people generate open-ended, like fairly open-ended content, but all the content that people are interacting with the interface is already like pre-generated. We just basically index, decode it, label it really nicely, and make it very intuitive to kind of follow each other and so on. So we have this basic mechanic basically, which is following, and we don't want to onboard like let bots farm followings, because we don't have yet built in the layer to mitigate this. So we are only onboarding genuine humans, and for us, on-chain data is like one of the easiest signals, like let's say proofs of human behind it, because as what, for example, Elon right now is trying to solve with Twitter is by basically making like a per $8 fee per month. And this is basically introduces cost to kind of prioritize those that content creators and users that are paying versus those who might be bots or have not basically subscribed. So this is just solving the same problem, but in our case, if we look at our criteria, you need the 75 transactions, maybe like ENS domain plus ENS avatar. That's probably like one of the easiest. It's basically will cost you like $80 to create this bot. So it's basically we're solving the same problem, but in leveraging the existing data from chain, etc. Because we like. We love basically working in the indexing all the on-chain data because it's there's so many infinite ways how to surface different products and experiences based off the interactions that are happening on chain, and I think we haven't even begun scratching. And this is like the beautiful potential of the public blockchains in general to this permissionless nature of builders, kind of tapping into this data, indexing whatever they like, and building all sorts of different really cool like toolings, experiences, etc., without having like a centralized governing body that, let's say, gives you an API key or something to get access to the data. Everyone can access it. It's just a matter of like having the knowledge, resources, like maybe skills and so on. But I think that's the beauty.
Yeah, on what basis did you decide on the gating? Because some of them seem super specific. It's like, how did you decide the parameters? Like, oh, it needs to be 75%, 75 plus transactions. It has to be an ENS domain. It has to be an avatar. Like, what made you come on to those parameters for gating?
Good question, thank you. So initially the idea was we had the first gating through central basically form. People they can still apply for the form if they don't fit the criteria. So we had like over 4,000 applications, and we were going there hand by hand through all the applications. But usually what we were doing is basically we were looking for some sort of activity on chain, and like having an ENS, it was a very easy signal for us. Like having like 100 transactions, etc., was very easy for us to kind of see that, okay, this is a human being there. So we immediately whitelisted. So basically, it's partially automating what we were doing by hand. And secondly, how we see is that for ENS specific criteria, having a resolved ENS domain, and also having an avatar set on ENS, it's us driving adoption for the ENS protocols so that people have custody of their own domains and names and identities, so that we are basically driving adoption for such protocols from our side, from like the application layer side. And we even like entire, if you go to the interface, all the wallets we're using, like it's basically all the avatars come from ENS, so all their names come from ENS. So this is like for us to leverage, instead of like uploading or storing your avatars, we're just encouraging people to use ENS. So that's like the idea. And for other criterias, 75, if might be we'll keep lowering this, but I think it's just a nice way to start, because there are lots of bots that are in the range between like basically up to like 100 transactions. Basically, it's usually like 20 to 80, I think, from what I saw, that are basically farming all sorts of different obvious airdrops. So they're like just doing very basic interactions with each protocols, and so those are not very genuine humans.
Interesting.
A mix of criteria kind of filters out the. Plus, we promote the protocols and adoption of decentralized identity systems. So that's basically the idea.
That's amazing.
And also, we have a Farcast. Sorry to interrupt. If you have a Farcast account, you get access to the application, because a Farcast does hand picking. So they are doing the diligence for every single user.
Can you pronounce how is that spelled?
Farcaster. Farcaster.
Oh, Farcaster. Got it.
Yes, so it's like a competition to Lens, but fairly client-oriented, driven approach, and they're basically onboarding by hand every single person, and they have like 5,000 users, I think, right now, and we know their mechanics, so we can basically, like, we saw all the people that have been onboarded, they were like genuine humans, and we just literally leverage their due diligence expertise there, and also introduce some value for the people that use Farcaster, because we index Farcaster social graphs. So when you come from Farcaster to interface, we can showcase all your friends that you have followed there, and then refollow them on interface, so that you can also see what they're doing. Not only what they're posting on Farcaster, which is basically like a decentralized protocol Twitter, but protocolized Twitter approach, but also see what these people are doing on chain. So it's like a perfect synergy between the two platforms, and not protocol and platform.
Perfect.
Interface and Farcaster.
Thank you so much for taking us through that. And why did you guys choose to specifically work around Ethereum? Like, why not Solana? Why not any other blockchain?
So we are basically proceeding with where real humans are. So we're trying to solve for the for the people, and I think Ethereum still has like relatively majority of
Web3 people.
culture-wide. Yeah, not just Web3 people, but all the innovation, all the new stuff usually is basically gets created on the interface. On interface. Oh, sorry, on Ethereum.
Yes.
Yeah, so we will be scaling to L2, so I think soon. First, I think will be Optimism. Optimism, because they have a mirror publication, and we believe that there is basically a very nice, there is basically a real content being generated, and a lot of value we can add to the community of writers there, by letting all the publishers connect with their audiences, and audience stay updated with the publishers, and vice versa. So basically, I think we could really provide a lot of value for this sector vertical. And so basically how we, in our decision, like operation, design, decision, etc., prioritization, we are always looking at what are the human interactions. So when we were beginning, there were back then, like in February this year, like NFT was blowing up, so like continuously blowing up. So there were like a lot of NFT platforms to kind of serve the need for the very quick, basically flippers, traders, etc. So for us, we didn't even consider it to start with this vertical, because with NFT specifics, because we believe this was like a short-term, unsustainable, not very general kind of set of activities. I mean, there is a niche for the NFTs, and we don't believe NFTs themselves are a vertical of their own, because you can say there maybe collectibles but NFTs, they can be all sort of different, and it's just a base primitive that could be representing all sorts of different things. It could be your tickets, it could be your ownership of the company, it could be your friends, it could be your connections, it could be some content, etc. So we are looking not at the things that are, let's say, as I just described, like in the previous cycles of NFTs, but we're looking at what people are actually doing. And in this case, like governance or mirror publication makes a lot more sense.
100%. Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think the next couple of questions I'd like to touch upon is contribution. You know, you have worked as a contributor at Juicebox, at Gitcoin, and at Uniswap, and you didn't come initially from a tech background and went on to teach yourself everything. So what was the biggest challenge that you face as a contributor that you'd say like still persists?
Interesting. Biggest challenge as a contributor. So yeah, I think what you described is a pretty like long journey since like 2017. So I initially started like doing very small Gitcoin bounties on Gitcoin, and that was like contributing little pieces of code as I was learning. And the only reason I got into technical is to participate in Ethereum and so on. And this is in this like how I see a human civilizational shift of how people interact. But regarding the challenges that I faced, I think over time there are various ones, and I think interface we are trying to address a lot of the ones that we can experience is that it's information asymmetry is being dispersed and scattered all over the place. It's accessibility. So those kind of things that we're trying to solve, and they're partially help should be much more making much more usable. Friendly to kind of participate in DAOs, etc. So you can go to multisig safe and see what multisig signers what they've been doing, and so on. So you can kind of do a very basic due diligence on delegates, what they're voting for, and what kind of things like how the funds get redistributed, and so on. So just from the interface itself. So here maybe this helps a little bit, but regarding as a, I think actually. I'm not sure what will be the biggest challenge, but I think from people outside of the industry, I might guess that the biggest challenge is just to understand the ethos of the open-ended nature of these protocols and DAOs, etc. Is that like you can just go to Discord or go to the governance forum and go to the GitHub repositories or go or do analytics, etc. Whatever it is of interest for you for this protocol, you can just begin tapping and tipping your toes and see what's there, what's missing, how you can apply, how you can help. For example, a lot of my contributions were like writing Dune analytics, not a lot, but few, I would say. And they were driven by me just trying to understand what was like the financials for this specific protocol. So I would like to build so that way I learned a little bit SQL query, etc. And so on. And for the Uniswap, for example, I kept missing various, how do you call it, governance proposals. And this is just part of the information asymmetry being dispersed everywhere. So the idea was basically to kind of start create a Uniswap letter so that one person makes an effort and everyone else benefits of just staying updated with everything happening there.
That's
very
amazing.
Basic way to solve. But I think the biggest challenge would be is just to understand this, that there are such things, platforms that protocols that are fairly open-ended that you can just tap in and start contributing without having I don't know, depending. Yeah, just look around what I Discord, etc. So I think a lot of things you can just build and then maybe you will get even rewarded. Even I would say in general, not just because I've been how to say, as a user of all the protocols, you get ENS airdrops, you get Uniswap airdrops, Optimism, and so on, Gitcoin. And then I got Gitcoin airdrop because I was contributing back in 2017-18. People were getting Gitcoin because they were donating to grants, etc. So there's being just using things, not just farming, but actually trying to kind of be true to whatever. I think it's really benefiting. So this itself is a contribution. I think if you swap on Uniswap back when it was early, it's you were early user. You drove the volume. Maybe you provide some liquidity, so they distributed part of the protocol capital up to you as well, to the members. I think there's all sort of different contributions that people can write memes, and it's just I think a matter of understanding where are your interests lie, and who can you where you can apply this interest, skills, and so on. Because I think it's just whatever you can think of. There is basically whatever activity you can think of. I don't know, making memes, designing pops, setting up community calls, podcast. I don't know, even transcripting calls, and I don't know, writing queries, coding, doing governance proposals. Yeah, there is so much, and but I think the biggest challenge, sorry, took too long to answer, but it just...
No, I get it. I think the reason I was asking that is when, as a contributor, you, first of all, the problem is discovery. How do you discover what DAO you want to contribute to? Then is you joining a Discord server, and then Discord is messy, right? For every community, every DAO, the Discord looks different, right? So even if you get familiar with one, you have to educate yourself about the next one. But I feel like it's amazing that you acted as a contributor, and like you said, for anything one can think of, there's always work to do, there's always boundaries to do. So be curious, and at this point, in this early stage, you just have to go ahead and figure it out, right? I think one thing that's really nice, which I'm observing in a lot of like amazing DAOs, the community managers are super active. So even if you feel lost, just go on the channel chat and express, like, hey guys, I'm super into music in this music DAO. Like, how is it that I should get started? What should be my first step? And I feel like that's what Web3 is, so community driven. Everyone is so down to help you. But I feel like that initial process of just getting started has been something. And I think we as a DAO tooling company, I feel like that's why we talk a lot about like what are pain points people facing, so that we can build tools on top of it. And I feel like today I was just discussing with someone that they were like, oh my god, I want to work as a community manager, but I don't know where to get started. I don't know which DAO to participate in. And that's why we've been working on a discovery tool, so that you can discover what all DAOs are there. And when you discover it, there's also a section about how to join, because I feel like these are actual challenges people face, right? Like you said, in some places you'll have to buy a token to get started, and some places you can just without anything, you can just hop on a Discord server and get started. So I feel that's amazing. But I would like to ask you, like, you were
If
not. Sorry?
So, to interrupt, if I were to like, if I'm eligible to give any advice, I would just
Please.
also just suggest to. I'm not sure if I have this, but basically, I would suggest to venture into the DAOs that are of interest to you. So if there's something if you're interested in financial primitives, etc., you started researching this redox, etc. So depending on like, it should come from what are your interests are. So you should be curious about this specific project or what they have built, the product, etc. And then I think everything else comes. It's like a personal reflection, because I always, like, when I learned the code and etc., I would always build things to learn new technology. I would basically pretend that I'm building like a startup or something like this, something that I was like interested, like, so that would be like how to say, additional motivation. So I was building something exciting that I thought was pretty cool, and along the way also getting to like learn and so on.
Without a doubt, I couldn't agree more. Like, if you're not working towards something that you're interested in, very soon it'll get super boring and you will, like, just drop off. When things get tough, I think it's the passion and the curiosity that, push the needle, where logic doesn't play out. So definitely, I feel like the best way to get started is joining in things you're interested in. And props to you. I know that you were working on the news letter with Uniswap on a bi-weekly basis, but I didn't know why. And now that you just mentioned the reason, that the fact that you were not able to keep up with, when the governance is, when, what's going on in the ecosystem, you decided to write newsletters about it just to make sure that everyone's on the same page. I think that is phenomenal work on your end. And the fact that you were from a non-technical background and you were still learning how to be a contributor, you participated in like Uniswap, which is a protocol. So I wanted to ask you, like, what are some other ways in which you can contribute in a DeFi? Because people are like, it's easy to contribute to a social DAO, to a community DAO, but it's tough to contribute to like a protocol. So what would be some of your suggestions for people who are new in the space?
I don't think there's any like, as I said, there is like, have great they have no foundation. Back then it was the use of grants program. I think most of the big and medium-sized protocols, they have these grants and so on, and they all it doesn't matter what you are building, where like a super complex MMM, like with the ranges, etc., like a pretty like a complex set of financial primitives. All of them needs to be kind of communicated, so the memes can help. So I think it's just also maybe just a matter of understanding the structure of this specific organization or project, or who are the people who to reach out. I would also say, from personal, I think it makes a lot more sense to kind of begin. I prefer to kind of first try to do something like rather than like research, at least find instead of like trying to get somebody attention and ask like how can I help. I think very useful is to kind of actually identify what is what is missing. But there is also like there are some projects have this request for what's it called, a request for basically there's things that they need and they're just looking for somebody to execute it. So but then I think there's also, if you're just researching, you can then discover a lot of things within like what could be, where could you apply your skills, knowledge, etc. without like going directly to kind of. But I think it's just like everyone behaves and communicates differently. I prefer to kind of try to do a little bit prior before pinging anyone, so that I at least have
And I think
not
that's
waste anyone's time.
Yeah, I think that's one of the smartest way to do it, right? Identify a gap and go with the solution. I think that's one of the best ways to actually get a response. So you were working as a contributor, but I'd love to ask you, Viju, is what do you think is the best way to incentivize people? I feel like money giveaways, even NFTs at this point, can trigger bad behavior in a community, you know, like spamming and doing this and that. So I feel like I often ask myself this question, like people who are active in my community, people who are really contributing, like how is it that I can truly incentivize them? Like, how are you getting compensated in like different places, whether it was Juicebox, Gitcoin, or Uniswap?
Various way. So yeah, I would say in the broader spectrum, how to incentivize. I would say the beauty of the DAO approach and so on is sharing ownership. So I think that's like if it's financial and it's very value driven approach, but I think having ownership. How I see it basically, I think I tweeted like a few years ago. Is basically sometimes like I would buy a token. Let's say like I think I bought Juicebox, like a 0.2 ETH worth of Juicebox a year ago or something. And then I bought it first, and then I started learning what did I just buy. And then because I had ownership, I actually purchased this asset. I was like, okay, how do I make my asset worth more? And then I will be researching how I could maybe, and I built like a due analytics query for Juicebox for this specific, so that because I already like when I was researching what did I buy, I was like, okay, I don't know specifics, like what are the protocol revenues, etc. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna build this Dune that showcases the Juicebox revenues, so that everyone else can then see that they generates a lot of revenue, and then what I just bought would also like get a value appreciated because new people will get discovered. So this is like a one approach. Obviously, like. Everyone is coming from different backgrounds. People, so you don't need to do like financial prior, like investment prior to this. But I think having ownership is just it makes more sense because you're like naturally incentivized, and I think here it's nice to have that. In the industry, we have this tendency that distributions are fairly, dispersed among the communities, that they are foundations. So, relatively, so if you compare to the structure of the startups, when there's usually like much bigger chunk comes to early founders, then there's investors, and then there's also maybe like some sort of allocation for the team over like long term within like the option. So I think the whole structure has been like going like this, basically redistributing to broader set of stakeholders of the protocol, token, etc., relatively to companies,
right?
And because you have a lot of participants, and I think, but also the distribution mechanics in itself is very. I think it's you cannot. I think industry. We cannot like you have to come up with every time with a new distribution mechanic, because once you do a distribution mechanics, it gets farmed. So it's, if you would like to distribute among real people that are like it's gonna hold or they believe, you have to innovate. So let's say Uniswap, just like when they dropped Uni based on usage of the protocol, they killed every single like nobody can now distribute based on pure because on the usage. I mean, so that's why like successful distribution airdrops were
like that
introduced.
Means that you couldn't trade Uniswap tokens for money.
Sorry?
That meaning
No, you can. Oh no, I mean that once you execute a distribution mechanic, like for airdrop, people then becoming using this as a strategy to farm others. And then, so if you're just if you're a protocol that would like to distribute your tokens among the stakeholders that are incentivized, they are real contributors, they're real users, etc., you cannot now copy just Uniswap model of distribution, or let's say some other model of distribution, because it's farmable, right? So it's like obvious, if you use, you become some sort of token owner. So you have to come up with different ways to, if you want to basically distribute among the people or contributors, not the farmers, because I mean, farmers, they might play the role. Maybe they're gonna drive a little bit extra volume or usage, etc. early on. So with expectation to get the airdrops, I think I heard that like third of the volume of MetaMask's router is just like, or maybe 2/3 is just like a bunch of whales trading for the future MetaMask token. So I mean, for MetaMask, it's probably nice to showcase the investors that they have like this volume. But this is something like, I'm not sure this was specifically your question.
No, I think it makes sense, right? Incentivize basically is mean like how can you deliver value to other people, and I feel like ownership is definitely one of the ways. We spoke about that, right now.
Sorry to that. Be transparent, I think helps, and try to create value, things that people want or helps people, etc. So not some. Yeah, I think but that's not just for the incentivization. It's in general terms. If you build, people come because they're interested in something that you are building. Maybe we'll see.
Definitely. I feel like whenever you're delivering value like that, it just automatically attracts people and makes them, gravitate towards you, without a doubt. I feel like what interface is doing, and Web3 in general, right? Like it's all about making things transparent. It's all about accessibility. And what interface is doing today is making all of those transactions and interactions with wallet much more like easily readable and accessible. But I feel like the debate here is that Web3 enables all on-chain activity to be public, and right now Web3 requires you to give up your privacy entirely. But I feel like I'd love to know your thoughts on the dangers of like letting out this privacy on Web3, right? Like, should all info really, really be accessible? What is your thought on it?
Yeah, for sure, they should not be. But when we are talking about the public blockchains and the nature of public blockchains, I think there is a lot of different benefits for the transparency. If you look at let's say the collapse of all the 3 R's, Capital, Celsius, etc., those who were during life cycle, they turned out to be under collateralized, etc., over basically got buried in their own debt because they were closed system, and there was for example, DAI is open-end system. Everyone can see, everyone can kind of in MakerDAO, I mean, so everyone can let's say if you are under collateralized, buy out your collateral, etc. So I think those things are beautiful, like having open-ended financial system, transparent, so everyone can keep an eye on each other, because it's super important. But then obviously things like having privacy on your own balances, or maybe being able to privately send some transaction to your friends or family, etc., or be able to purchase things so that it's not all encoded on chain. So when you buy something, so that it doesn't then get mined by advertisers, etc., to build that. So I think here it's we will move as we evolve with privacy enabled L2s, etc. We'll have a lot more interesting stuff, and I think a lot of human interaction should be private. So wallet to wallet messaging should be encoded, and nobody should be able to get access to this, etc. And some of the transactions, but I think a lot of systems benefit from transparency. When there's basically there's certain pieces like your reputation. If you would like to build an online, or just your reputation as a protocol, etc., it benefits us from being like a fully transparent, because people see what you have been doing, what you have contributing to, etc. Because you're like now having this like a virtual on-chain footprint of your whatever, like your pseudonymous or yourself. So I think that's pretty nice. So I think we should be cautious what it should be like transparent and publicly available, and what things shouldn't. And I think we'll see a lot more things that will venture into privacy enabled how to say communication, transactions, interactions, etc.
Yeah.
And also one thing I would add to this is I personally love the nature of pseudo-anonymous culture. Is that it is, I think it's very how do you say, not liberating, it's like a liberating, not sure, not liberating, leveling the playing field, because we are canceling all the different prejudices. So if you're like, some people might be like, I don't know, have prejudices on race, on gender, on age, etc. And then when you're hiding, you kind of like a pseudonymous. You could be a kid, a 12 years old kid who just build a primitive, but you are just but then it's just like people would never think that. So it's just, I think it's very liberating, because but this is more from the culture perspective. I think it's nice because it levels the playing field, so that it kills this prejudice. I think sometimes it happens unintentionally by the people, because whatever the cultures they're growing into, it might be. But I think this, you are just like not hiding, but your interface to the outside world, your reputation is around like some sort of PFP project, but you have contributed, you have proven records of delivering, etc. This what really matters. Then why should you be like, I don't know, disincentivized because of your nationality, gender, etc., or whatever? So I think this is also very nice to have this kind of culture of pseudo-anonymous or anonymous, but pseudo is mean like you don't agree. I think pseudo.
I think Balaji just had a podcast with Lex, about an 8-hour long podcast, and there he was talking about the pseudo economy, and he said the most amazing thing about it is that it really does level the playing field, that you are not able to have any biases on, because you don't know where you don't know people's gender, you don't know their nationality, you don't know their accent because you're chatting with them, so many different things, with age and everything. So I think that's really, really amazing. And like you said, there are definite pros of having things so transparent in Web3, yet there are definitely things where privacy should be maintained, like wallet-to-wallet messaging and stuff like that. And I feel like we'll see this become more, like privacy become more and more sophisticated, but what it means for Web3 at this point. We do with this, towards the end, we do this really fun exercise, which is called Tech Stack. So basically, I'd love for you to rate your top 3 DAO tools and roast 3 DAO tools. So I'm just gonna share the screen. Okay. So if you had to rate your top 3 favorite DAO tools, rate them in order.
Okay. So I love ENS Identity. So I think that's a good one. I also...
You can tell everyone what heading they're under, because it might be difficult to track. Identity. Perfect.
Yeah, so actually Bright idea was pretty cool idea. I feel like to kind of prove and have a calls, but I think for communication wise and knowledge management, we use a lot of Notion because we used to, but I really love Anytype, and I think Anytype is gonna blow, but it's much bigger learning curve. So, but it lets you can define, it's like one layer above Notion regarding abstraction, and you can define your own types. So it's like you can really build a very powerful, nodes, knowledge-based systems, etc., nodes, etc. So maybe Obsidian is a little bit complex for me, but I think Anytype is gonna be like, I just need to kind of make additional effort to make it the default knowledge-based acquisition system for myself, and maybe it could be then utilized. So I think Gnosis Safe is for now still like one of the core enabling pieces of infrastructure that is composed up on top of many different ways. Yeah, and obviously I'm a bit biased, but I think Juicebox is a very nice. I would say I actually love Juicebox not for the treasury management protocol itself, but rather the network of different DAOs kind of building an ecosystem. So I think if they manage to hit this network effect of all the different DAOs and apps, leveraging different capabilities like doing podcast, designing 3D pieces in various metaverse places, and doing a lot of DAOing proposals. So I think that's a very nice approach.
Okay,
Content
now
product.
you
Oh
have
yeah,
to
Mira
like.
and Radical and Figma is nice. Oh, I mean, Radical still yet to learn, but Mira, Figma, GitHub is basically without which ones we wouldn't live.
Okay,
Right.
now you have to roast three tools. Like, what are the worst three tools and why?
Okay, I don't wanna be the bad guy. Okay, actually, I think it's not the worst, but I think Aragorn, the guy
Oh,
that
where is
is
it?
calling in Aragon, basically. They were back in 2017 18, the DAO Toolings frameworks, top left corner. So those two are the era of the fairly early, like previous cycle ideas of how the DAOs should be structured. And I think both of them kind of went the way to kind of serve the problem, not the problem, but not actually needs, but they kept building features and building this entire frameworks and set of things. And it turned out like once the DAOs actually came to existence, all they needed is like a multi-sig and a snapshot or something like this and a tally. So I think those kind of two things like Colony Aragon, they are just misfortune of having a lot of kind of ideas, but no real user feedback or usage. So they were they didn't have this loop to kind of reflect and build, fine tune.
Yeah,
Yeah,
next
so
one
those,
would be. Okay, so you said colony arrogant. Okay, two. I think then one's left.
yeah, but they're all the same. So I mean, like in the same regard, they have the same problem. I would say, though I love Gitcoin for what they're doing with, let's say, public goods and
But you
DAO,
can't
but
tell us
I
what you
think
love. You have to roast the tool.
no. But I'm gonna roast it because Gitcoin is. I love what they're doing with the public goods and grants, but I would say the interface, the UI hasn't moved a lot for a while now. So I think it's sometimes it's very painful. I haven't donated a lot because that often because it's a pain for me to discover projects, etc. It's like instead of having it's like making effort to use it. So it's like you have to overstep instead of it should be pretty frictionless. So it's I
Yeah.
hope they can evolve and improve that. I think so. Maybe I think for roasting that
Okay,
should be
next.
good. There is a question in chat as well.
Yes, we will take up the question right after the activity.
What do we need to roast another one?
So yeah, you chose arrogant, Gitcoin, and perfect.
Actually, I would say then we can roast Collab Land. They started early, but they
Sure,
haven't
you can
evolved,
roast
so we
them.
can. Yeah.
Okay, done. Collab land. Great. Thank you so much for doing this. This was so much fun. And let's hop on to the community question. Viju, would you like to read it?
Yeah, sure. So the question is, while building interface, what are the sources? Where are you pulling the data from? Are the insights pulled only from on-chain or off-chain sources as well? Could you share some sources if off-chain sources are used as well? And if only if your company data privacy allows you to share. Okay. So we're basically getting all the data raw from the node itself, so it's all on-chain data, and we're then like indexing, aggregating, processing depending on what we're working with. So if it's an NFT, we fetch like all the metadata, etc. So we're gonna have all these different decoders, parsers, and processors. And from on-chain data, for now we're focusing on-chain. Basically, we're gonna be thinking to basically integrate things like snapshot, which are partially like they're stored off chain, etc. But I think it will be time. By the time we get there, we'll decide. And basically, that's like all on chain data. I think we're just basically we work a lot and then we process and make it like much more attractive.
Okay, thank you so much for taking up that. And Viju, While building interface, if I had to give you $1 million to solve your biggest problem currently, what would that problem be? Like something that's keeping you awake at night.
Yeah, but I'm not sure money solves this. The things that keep me awake at night. Money doesn't solve it. I need to.
But what is that problem? We give you that.
Yeah, I think in general it's a conceptualization of how to make sense of all the things that are happening on decentralized, how to correctly, without losing beautiful things of Web3, abstract the complexities and within decentralized systems without sacrificing like custody and so on, permissionless nature. But then you also have don't at the same time don't sacrifice the experience of the, like, let's say, Web2 platform. So leveraging those two things, where how to, I think it's a constant inner and outer team, internal team discussions. How to approach, solve problems. So I think that's like one endless, continuous challenges. It's basically.
I feel like everyone's going through it, right? Like being able to identify what are the right problems to solve for. And when I was going through your app, I feel like one of the really valuable and interesting things maybe you guys could do is in terms of knowledge management, because you're collecting so much data on what these wallets are doing and tracking the activities. We just hosted Roxane from Gab and DAO. She one of the core contributors and handles growth there, and she spoke about that one of the biggest pain points for her is knowledge management, in terms of if she wants to share some information only with the contributors, only with the community, versus some information only with people who are just there to chill and hang out in the Discord server. Like, how do you do that knowledge management? And I feel like with all the activity tracking of wallets that you're doing, you will truly be able to segregate people. Like, oh, these people have been contributing to the top DAOs and these are the number of transactions they've had. They sit on the elite list of contributors versus these guys on the mid level versus these guys are complete beginners. So I feel like that's something super, super interesting you can do. And we at DaoLens ourselves, one of the next products we're building and working on is to gather insights from, because we handle onboarding, we're able to gather so much data on users that we're able to understand, what is the percentage of people who are interested in football? What is the percentage of people who are interested in cats? Based on people's on-chain wallet activities, and be able to share those insights with community managers so that we can tell them 30% of the people are into NFTs. Why don't you share a meme related to it and stuff like that? So I feel like I'm just speaking at my luxury, but I feel like something like interface can be a super interesting marriage and a very interesting ingredient to have in that project of ours. So I feel like you guys are solving a bunch of amazing problems and you can really grow on it.
So what you touched, I think the more specifics, there are platforms like Digin, Score, Anux that are basically trying to, and other identity-based platforms like ArcX, Prosper, etc. that are kind of index and concept, index your activities, assets, etc., and distill them into a single asset, let's say reference, NFT points, etc. So that, let's say you, and so on. So that's, I think, their focus. We are basically how we're seeing, we're building an experience we're trying to solve not just accessibility but discoverability. So we're building interface in a manner of, so basically how we see it is like a fabric to navigate in this space. So we're taking all the different pieces like POAPs, safes, collections, NFTs, and trying, even for the NFTs itself, you cannot just showcase the NFTs it doesn't make sense to showcase NFT because some NFTs reflect the community. So it will make more sense for you to kind of showcase and that you participate in this community, etc. So each of the specifics, I think we're still fairly early, and even though we have ourselves showcased all your NFTs, but I think within that we need to look at categorize each of these different things, what they actually represent, so that we can then showcase what it is. I think a good example would be your domain, ENS domain. it doesn't really make sense to showcase like the default placeholder, etc. It makes more sense to showcase like just any other NFT. It will make more sense to showcase that this thing is about to expire, or this is like the domain name, etc. So this data should be surfaced for this specific NFT, and there are many different others. Like Uniswap V3 are financial primitives that should be put like on DeFi platforms, should be showcased there. And I think there are lots of different things that are just leveraging the NFT standard, but can be in itself also all sort of different things.
Interesting. Well, all the best to you for what you're building. I love the mission that you guys are working on is making Web3 much more readable. And I think you're also doing it in a beautiful fashion. Your website's amazing. I love your servers emoji. I really join servers to use emojis and stuff. And even your NFT particle is very, very beautifully curated. So I feel like lots of those things are associated with like feeling good and making it much more friendly and stuff like that. So great job on that. We do any ending thoughts?
Yeah, thanks so much. So everything you just said is basically like all designed website, etc. It's all work of Anashka. So maybe you should guys also invite her.
I will. Please make an introduction. I'd love to speak with her. I think she's phenomenally talented.
Yeah. So. But final words, I would say if this was the theme of contributing, etc., I think it generally, and there's let's say, bear markets when there is no easy cash or whatever, like everything get distracted, etc. I think it's a nice time to see, to build, to learn, to kind of excel. So I think it's, much is, I think, not, it's a good time to kind of learn and build, participate. Absolutely. Because usually when there's like the people who are just for the financials, not the, let's say, culture, ideas, etc., they get washed away pretty quickly, and usually people who actually care about stuff, they stick around, and then from this you can leverage most of the knowledge and the experience and maybe help. So it's a very good time to build right now. So if that's my final word.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Riju. It's such a pleasure to host you. Thank you so much for being so transparent and sharing so many amazing insights. Absolutely rooting for you. And thank you so much for everyone who's joined the Discord space. I hope you guys loved the episode. Please be in tune. I believe you're hosting some on Thursday or Friday. I'm not sure, but we are going to populate all our events that were happening this month. So keep in touch for that. Thank you, everyone, so much for joining.
Sorry.